All right, thanks for joining us. Today we are with Bud, and joining us is Walter. Walter has a unique experience because he came from another flight school over to Venture West and just recently passed his private pilot check ride as well. And we're going to learn about his experience, where he came from, and his aspirations going on to the future. So Walter, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I came from a different school before I started Venture West. I got about halfway through the program, and I just didn't think the school was a good fit for me. So
okay, hold on a minute. I don't want to interrupt.
Mm-hmm.
A good fit meaning there wasn't enough structure or enough support or both?
all the above.
Okay.
Pretty much.
D, all the above.
Yeah.
Okay. So you're just telling me you were kind of left to free wheel. A lot of schools will do that. You pay a lot of money, and then they're like, go home and learn, and they hand you a book. That don't work.
So I basically at the other school, I showed up to fly, and that was about it. Everything else was in my hands. So studying ground, even ground lessons, you just kind of show up, and they expect you to have the knowledge, like have read beforehand, and then they just kind of, you ask them questions. They don't really go over the topics very in depth, at least.
Yeah.
So I needed something a little more structured for myself.
You need shoulders to lean on.
Yeah.
And part of that is having some support all the way around you too. I think that's important. That's what we found in the same project. So in the same type system. So go ahead. I'm sorry I didn't interrupt you, but I wanted to get. You said that flight school left some holes.
Yeah, some stuff to be desired.
Right. And so now so then one day you were like, you know what, I can do better. Or how did you come to that decision? I didn't think, I feel like if I continued on the path that I was going, it wouldn't work out very well. And I didn't want to get to my check ride and then be like, oh, well, I don't feel prepared, So I opted out of the school, and I looked around, and I found the school I'm at now. And it gave me a lot more structure, that peer camaraderie, I guess, and community.
Yeah.
And helped me get more structure in my learning, and that helped a lot.
Yeah. I'm sure transitioning schools can be hard because now your new school, they don't know what kind of knowledge you already have previously, so it can feel sometimes like you're learning new stuff over and over.
Yeah.
And then you may feel like you're maybe forgetting certain things. So I'm sure that check ride the day of was probably a little nerve-wracking for you. How did that go?
For sure. I mean, when I woke up that day, I was just kind of like, it felt surreal. I was like, wow, am I finally here? I didn't, and then when I showed up, everything just kind of went really quick, I think. But once I got into the groove and got into the room with the DPE, I felt like he was very personal, and he made it very relaxing as best as he could. Yeah. And I was able to get into the groove and, have a good back and forth with him.
Yeah.
Yeah, as the day goes along, as they go into the check rides, we're lucky to have a student body that we get vested in at the school. And what happens at Venture West is everybody becomes kind of part of a team. So Walter and I have been hanging out for a long time as part of this process. So I try to track as the day goes along when they go in for their check ride with their DP, because it kind of works in sections. They get the oral done and they'll take a break or two. And I kind of talk to the DPE in the middle because I want to know what's happening, but I don't want to ask, and they would never tell me. But I can get a feel for it, because I can read humans like we do. And as this DPE walked out right in the middle of, they were taking a little break, and I was talking to him, and he was like, this dude's crushing it. So I knew we were good. We had already. I knew when he walked in he was going to crush it, but it felt good to get that because from the outside looking in, I'm always at a panic. It's like you're sending. Don't take this the wrong way, but it's like you're sending a friend in, and you're like, you can do this, and then you're sitting on the outside of the wall waiting. It's a fun process, and the great thing is I feel like there's so many other people, your friends at the school, that are doing the same thing, and then you get to come back in, and they get to see your face, and they're like, you passed. Then everybody's all talking. You can hear him going, he passed. So it goes all the way through the building. It's kind of neat.
You walk in, and everyone's like waiting for you to say what happened. And you're like, hey.
Yeah, and then that one friend that that doesn't pass, it's suddenly, oh, sorry, man. Yeah, a little awkward.
We don't have that friend here.
Yeah, I had that a long time ago. So totally Walter, tell us about that check ride day. How did that go with the examiner? How did you present yourself? And then as you worked through pilot quals, airworthiness, and things like that, how did that go down?
Well, so when we first got started, we kind of just had some small talk. And then when we got started, he just gave me a scenario. And I remember him saying, like, this is a scenario we're going to use the entire time we're talking. He's like, anytime I ask you a question, I want you to reference this scenario and be able to, think about what would pertain to this scenario. And I remember after, the first thing he asked me was just like, so you're going to go fly to, I think we said he was going to fly to Texas. And he's like, what do you do to get ready? And I just immediately, that's literally all he asked is like, how are you going to prepare for the flight? And I was like, well, and then I got up and went through all of PAVE. He let me write it all out.
Yep.
And I just I started from paid, went all the way down. I kind of just kept going. I didn't really stop. I kind of took control and just kind of went through it all. He didn't ask me too many questions. I thought that was a good sign during my check ride where he was just kind of listening. So, you know.
That's because he's engrossed in your process. Your process is spot on. He hasn't seen anything that said, hey, this is going to create a problem later on for another process. That means you were crushing it all the way down the line.
Yeah.
Man, that's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. It seems like there's two ways, either to let them ask you questions, you answer it, or you just take the lead and answer them. And when you take that latter one, when you take the lead, they won't really ask questions if you're covering all the topics as you go through, unless they kind of see a hole in the knowledge or anything like that. So as you went through airworthiness and then talked about your flight down to Texas, I guess, which would be a long flight, and what was it, an archery you were flying in? Yeah. Yeah, that's a long flight. Maybe he decided maybe not to do that after he found out how long it would take. But how did that scenario-based training go throughout the end? I'm assuming he gave you some sort of abnormal operation or emergency throughout the flight.
He gave me, so we did a engine failure, and then it led into an engine fire.
Oh, yeah.
And that was the emergencies he gave me during the flight.
Okay, yeah. And that was during the flight, or did he ask you on the ground how
he asked me
you would go about that?
On the ground, he only asked me about what I would do in an alternate, or loss of power, basically.
Yeah,
and then in the flight, that's when he gave me the fire and
Sweet.
engine loss.
And did you have any debrief notes with him at all, or for the oral portion?
Most of the notes were good. I mean, the only one he gave me that really was funny to me is because there was one question where I kind of dug myself a hole. It was the only thing I had to look up because he was asking me about high performance aircraft and complex, and he was asking me if I can just hop in like a high performance aircraft, and I was like, no, I can't. And he's like, well, why not? And he's like, at first I said you need a type rating, and then I immediately was like, wait, it's an endorsement. And then he was like, well, let's talk about type ratings. And then that was the hole I got myself into.
Yeah. And that'll do it.
I was able to explain what they were and get through it all. And then there was only one thing he got me on, which was he was asking about like, when do you need a type rating? And I was like, if it's a turbine powered aircraft, you have to have one. And there was one other thing, and I couldn't think of it, so I had to look it up. Yeah. But it was the weight limit, like the 12,500 pounds. Mm-hmm.
And you knew where to find that information.
Yeah, it was. It took me a second, but it was 6131. It just pretty quick.
Man knows his references too. Attaboy.
Nice.
That is so important to know. If you don't know it, hey, I know where to find that information. I simply know 6131 talks about type ratings. I'm sure the information is going to be there if that's all right with you. And the DPs are always cool with that.
Yeah, he was like, yeah. I was like, I know where to look it up. He's like, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
I just looked it up. I was like, oh, yeah, it's right here. And
that's awesome. Cool.
Bro, wait till I tell your CFI you just popped off a 6130. just off the cuff, man. That is so good. That is so good.
I love
Working with you. I mean, you're a CFI. You know how that process goes. The bonding that happens, especially in these accelerated programs. You guys are thrown together, and in the Venture West program, at least, because I don't know I really could speak for, they're flying 3 times a week. The bond that you build with that CFI, remember that CFI is really your first door opener into an airline. Mm-hmm. So you're building that relationship. And then the great thing is when they sit down in the class, and we keep the students set, so there's only 9 in one class. They're building with 3 CFIs, by the way. So they're building their first network, that whole database. And you know how important that is. You do this every single day. How often do you get a call and they're like, hey, John, I got this new job. And you're like, whatever, I'm fine, I'm happy. But you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
You got to have friends in this business. It's not what you know, it's who you know in this business.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Walter, what are your aspirations going on towards a career in aviation? What do you want to do?
I'm kind of on the fence right now. So my dad's a military pilot, and my uncle flies as an airline pilot. Yeah. And I also have an uncle who flies contractor work. So like I'm kind of like all the worlds. I definitely won't do military, but I'm kind of stuck between being a contractor or doing airline stuff, like major airline stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. Cool.
That's interesting. And you know what is interesting about that is that's sort of another avenue of something you can do as a pilot that, you may not be able to think of right off the top of your head, because in your mind, maybe as a pilot, you see it as just maybe you had it when you started, you're like, just airlines. And then when you got that airline shot,
yeah.
you did it. And then you were like, I do like corporate flying.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so you kind of back hanging and doing
Yeah.
what you do. And you find there's benefits to that too. So don't shut a door. And it's good that Walt's able to see around the circle
Yeah.
in areas that I may not even known have existed.
Yeah.
So it's great that he has that window. And that's another thing that you find when you get into flight school, the people around you, and I'm sure you will attest to this as well, the way that they got into aviation, Walt with some family hooks and some of the other people around our building. Some people even work for big airlines right now, ramp agents and such, that are coming to be pilots. So getting to interact with all these different people, you learn so much being engrossed in one of those type programs because you're kind of all together working with each other to get yourself the best outcome. And we know that you work better when you work as a team. The team that Walt was on, his entire team, I mean, in that crew, you had Connor, you had Colin, let's see, Porter was in that. There's a bunch of really good students that were in that. So they all worked together, and I watched them, and I started to think, man, it ain't going to be long before they know more than me. Didn't take long. It's a real short run. Yeah. They're really good at this.
Yeah.
They really are.
Yeah, that's good. Well, keep your doors open, because I remember that was how I was. I just thought airlines it was, and then when I got offered this job to fly privately, I was thrown because I didn't
Never
think
thought
that
about
would
it.
ever enter my viewpoint. So yeah, that's cool. And how old are you?
I'm 22.
Oh yeah, so awesome, man. You'll have such a great career ahead.
Yeah,
so.
I always hear best of both worlds. They always tell me stuff about both, and I'm like, I don't know what to choose.
Yeah,
They both sound
yeah.
good.
Start asking them the cons.
Yeah.
maybe you'll start finding some little clearer
That's
vision.
exactly right. And the great part of all of it is, the best part maybe of this business is the amount of time that you do have for yourself. I mean, you fly 15 days a month, 16 days a month. How many days a month are you flying roughly?
It's so random because I'm just at the
Right.
leisure of the boss, But but it goes back and forth.
Sure,
but
you have
Yeah.
a lot of time that
Yeah.
you can pursue other interests, make yourself a better
Yeah.
person,
Yeah.
get new endorsements, learn to fly helicopters like some people in the room did. I mean, you can do all kind of things when you have time off.
yeah.
I wouldn't know. I'm always here working. John.
Well, Walter, that's all I got for you. And thanks, and enjoy your training. We'll hope to talk to you when you pass your instrument training, just
thank you
before
for
you
having
start
me.
commercial.
Yeah, it won't be long, man. We're proud of you.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
Thank you.